Hello everyone, how are you doing? Hope you can all hear me. So just before we start, then let's just fix our motivation for exactly why it is we want to practice the spiritual path. As it's said by the Dalai Lama, then all spirituality is based on, first and foremost, altruism. And so what we want to do is make the world a better place. If you believe in something other than this world, then you also might seek transcendence. But essentially we need to abandon our selfishness and develop loving kindness and compassion for others. And these days there's a lot of people suffering, there's a lot of upheaval in the world. So we should kind of direct our energies and our efforts towards remedying the causes for the suffering that so many experience. That's kind of setting initially our motivation. It's called the excellent beginning. So Sunset kind of slipped in a few questions there. I thought I would answer. I will go to the Google Sheet today, but I just wanted to confront this one question. And he says, basically, if Tummo, so this is the pranayama practice, the inner heat practice that Tibetan Buddhists engage in, is considered to be so important, one of the most important practices, and why doesn't everybody do it? And so the question to ask is because quantum physics is the height of all scientific knowledge, why doesn't everybody practice quantum physics or study quantum physics? Well, quite frankly, a lot of people aren't interested in it, and it's really difficult, right? It's like brain surgery is just so important, it's so good. Why isn't everybody a brain surgeon? It's how it is for Tummo. It's a really advanced practice. This is a problem in general in the West, the way we approach the Dharma. We come to the Dharma and we think, okay, what's the most highest practice? What's the highest practice? What's the best practice? I'll do that. It's not like that. For example, the peak of Tibetan Buddhism is seen to be Mahamudra and Dzogchen. And so everybody wants to do it. And because of that, then lots of teachers are selling teachings on Mahamudra and Dzogchen. You can go, $70 a ticket, $150 for front row seats. You can go anywhere pretty well, any of these big cities, and you can receive instructions on this. But what is taught is that these are only for those of the highest, most exceptional qualities. And so Sunset goes on to say, do other pranayama practices which are widely available in the general public cause the same transformational effects as Tummo, but in a slower and safer way. So you have to understand, when it comes to any practice, it's not about the methods. This is what happens. We see methods and we think that's the practice. Right? Methods are a collection of techniques that are used to achieve a particular goal. For example, studying the alphabet is a way of learning a language, right? Well, there's different types of techniques, but there's different languages. There's the Chinese, kind of, pictoglyphs. We've got the Cyrillic alphabet, we've got the Brahmari alphabet, we've got the English alphabet. They're all used for different purposes. And the grammars are also different. But generally speaking, it's language, right? Well, that's the same on the spiritual path. I've said this before, then all spirituality is about reducing clinging. And it's to the extent to which that one reduces one's clinging that one approaches closer to authentic reality. And quite frankly, not all practices lead to the same results. For example, if we have a theistic belief and then we believe that God is responsible for everything, that belief itself reduces our clinging, but wrapped up with that view is a very strong form of clinging to the superiority of God and the ultimate permanent existence of God. Whether you think that's a good or bad thing, that's up for you to decide. But obviously there is some attachment or clinging to a sense of reality. So the important point is not the methods. The important point is the view that's associated with those methods, because the realization is directly associated with the view of the practice. Now, ultimately, realization means abandoning views, because views are conceptual objects. And realization is a non-conceptual object, but it's important. So in the view of a theistic religion, then God is supreme or permanent or whatever you want to call it. I guess there's worldly gods as well, right? And in Advaita Vedanta, there's a particular view. In Tibetan Buddhism, there's several different views. And progressively, then these bring one closer to the truth. So, for example, then we have Kundalini Yoga. And on the outside, it seems like it's exactly the same as Tummo. So what's the difference? Well, the difference is the view that's held. There are differences in the actual methodology, and that's because about the 12th century or something like that, most of this teaching was transferred into the Tibetan language. And shortly after that, then it was destroyed in its native country. So it used to be quite extensive in Kashmir, Afghanistan, Pakistan, these sort of places. And then it was completely wiped out by the superseding Muslim religion. And so these teachings no longer exist. And it's like that with Kundalini Yoga. It doesn't have the kind of breadth and profundity of what exists in the Tibetan tradition, just because it was destroyed and it's kind of been recreated. So you generally don't get the same extensive kind of teachings. Just a very simple example, and again I'm talking about methodology. Then in Tummo, when we do breath visualizations, there's a very complex system of visualizing the chakras and the channels, etc. And I've never seen this to that kind of degree of sophistication in the Hindu tradition. It's probably because it got wiped out, right? The books were burnt and people no longer taught it for many centuries. So you tend to get the aspects that still exist seem completely the same, but the view is different. So the question isn't to ask if the techniques lead to a particular result. It's the view that is associated with those techniques that will lead to a particular result. And so you don't necessarily need to do the outer aspects of a practice, right? So like in Tummo, one of the aspects of that is a kind of breath work, right? There's yogic exercises and there's breath work associated with Tummo. But it's not that. You don't need to do any of that stuff if you hold the view. And you'll see this in the life story of Milarepa, for example. Milarepa will say, people criticize him, saying, why aren't you practicing the Paramitra Sutrayana, etc. like that? And he will say, no, but I am. I'm doing it completely authentically. And that's because he held a completely authentic view. So everything he did, like for example, it says in Milarepa's life story, it's like everything he did was Chu. It was severance practice. Everything he did, was the Paramitra Sutrayana. And he will give kind of these technical terms, but it didn't look like he was doing any of that. For example, it didn't look like he was keeping vows. It says that you can only achieve the state of an arhat or liberation if you are a fully ordained monk. And he said, well, he wasn't. He was a lay person. But Milarepa kept vows better than anybody ever kept vows. I mean, not only didn't he eat in the afternoon, he didn't eat at all, for months. So it's important that we understand that. But we get really hung up on techniques and the outer aspects, and that's where the problem arises. And the other thing associated with Sunset's question is, why doesn't everybody practice it? Well, it's a restricted practice. I mean, plenty of people are teaching this online. You can go to YouTube and you can see Trokor and all the exercises, and if you copy that, you're not doing the real thing. It's only ever done in cloisters. It's done in like retreat situations. You don't do this publicly. It requires empowerment and instruction. You need three things, right? You need this Tri Lung Wong Sung, right? You need the guidance instructions, you need the transmission, the verbal transmission, and you need the empowerment. And that's generally done with a retreat master. Once you've made a decision, I'm going into retreat, then you do a special ceremony where you close the gate and no one's supposed to see you. When we were in 4-year retreat, for example, if a helicopter flew over, we would run and hide so nobody would see us. That's one of the samayas associated with doing the 6 yogas of Naropa. But these days, people do it in public. You just pay $2,000 and I'll teach you the 6 yogas. And you'll practice it at home. Right? There's a kind of commitment associated with that, if it's going to go right. For example, we spent 6 months in the yoga hall, and it was in winter, the coldest winter, like in decades in Scotland, practicing this heat practice. You've got to kind of do it like that. It's not just a series of techniques you can read in a book. So how many people, out of all the Buddhists how many of them done 4-year retreat? It's quite few. And within that 4-year retreat, how many of them have received authentic instructions on the 6 yogas? Very, very few. So of course, not everybody's going to do it. Just the same way, why isn't everybody an astronaut? Well, because it's extremely difficult. It's extremely rare to get that opportunity. And it's not like, we got this thing where we think if we just do the methods, we're going to get the results. But it's not like that. Every single individual is different. And there are things that are compatible with their disposition. And there's no one set of instructions that is suitable for all. Not everybody is suitable for doing these things. And so that's why we don't all do Tummo, for example. Somebody said, what is the meaning of Karma Choga? Karma is the family name. So you've got different people who give you vows, and their vows will have come down through a particular lineage. And because of that lineage, then you give a name, right? So some of them are Lodro, which means wisdom. Some of them are Karma. So I took my vows from Taisito Rinpoche, and his lineage is Karma lineage. So I have this. It's like the last name or the family name. But Choga is actually not my ordination name or anything like that. It was a refuge name. It's kind of a nickname. And it just means kind of Dharma bliss, or loves the Dharma, joy in Dharma, something like that. But it's a kind of a nickname. It's a refuge name. So in general, then, you should submit your questions to the Google form, and that way then everybody's question can be answered. Sometimes I will go to the chat and I'll answer impromptu questions people give. But that's kind of unfair. And then I get told off by the moderators because I keep straying. I keep wandering off topic. So I think I maybe spoke about this a little bit before. Somebody asked what's the difference between Vijñāna Skandha and primordial awareness. So this Vijñāna is consciousness. It's the fifth aggregate, right? And they're saying, well, what's the difference between that and primordial awareness? Well, let's just put it very briefly. Then what we have is what is called appearance, emptiness in union, right? Well, the appearing aspect is the consciousness. Consciousness is an awareness. Consciousness is the various different things that appear to the sense gates, the sense perceptions. And that includes the mental sense perception. So if I see physical form, that's consciousness. So in the Buddhist kind of science, what we have is we've got the manifestation of form, which is rupakaya, which is like forms, and then we've got mental events. And within mental events, there's various different categories. But essentially, the stream of consciousness is just this: I see a sight, I hear a sound, I have a pleasant smell, I have a imagined memory. These are these discrete moments of awareness. That's what we call consciousness. And that's the appearing aspect. Awareness, in Tibetan Buddhist, Rigpa, is the aware aspect. It's the empty aspect. So we've got a synthesis of appearance, emptiness. Appearance and emptiness are not separate. And the awareness side, or the luminous side, is the awareness side, which is characterless, it's colorless, it's without any kind of characteristics or elaborations. And that is the Rigpa side. So they're not the same. They're the same in the fact that appearance and emptiness are not two. But in general, we don't see the appearing aspect to be important. But worldly people, there's a difference between the Dharma and worldly people. Worldly people are all wrapped up in outer things, conscious events, like they'll take some magic mushrooms and have a wonderful experience and think, wow, that's so significant. But what we're talking about is just the appearing aspect. And the appearing aspect is seen as not being important. It's said that it cannot help or harm your meditation. What we need to do is to identify or recognize primordial awareness. And that's not dependent on objects. It's not dependent on appearances. But what we do is we think, well, I was meditating and I felt so blissful. That must be really spiritual experience. That's a worldly experience. Feeling blissful is a worldly experience. Those are worldly things. As it teaches, you've got the three experiences of meditation: bliss, clarity, and non-thought. And neither good nor bad, if you listen to Milarepa. But if I cling to those experiences, it leads to rebirth in the mundane world. For example, if you listen to Swami T, he's like an Advaita Vedanta scholar. He talks about the differences between the Advaita Vedanta and Buddhism, and he states very clearly that what they do is they generate this experience of bliss, and then they reside in that bliss. And that's what we say that the Hindus do. And what we say is that this leads to experiences of the mundane world, right? So this primordial wisdom is something other than that. It's the difference between what we call vipassana and shamatha. Shamatha is about objects, appearances. Vipassana is about this awareness or recognition. So anyway, I've talked about that topic many times. Could you explain how you understand dependent origination? I apologize for my ignorance. No need to apologize. It's not an easy topic, right? The best thing to do is look at the works of Chandrakirti and Nagarjuna, because Nagarjuna really lays out how it is. But in brief, what it's taught is we've got these sort of things called dependent phenomena, right? All appearances are like dependent phenomena. And that means they depend on causes and conditions. So there's two important points here. They appear because they're dependent phenomena. They could not appear unless they were dependent phenomena. So things need to be, causes and conditions need to come together so that things appear. Because if something is non-composite, so something that is causeless or non-composite cannot appear. For example, awareness is said to be a non-composite phenomena. Why is that? Something that's ultimate cannot exist within relationship to something else. You understand that? For example, if we have, it's said in all religion. It's the same. We have the Trinity in Christianity, right? The Trinity, we've got God, and we don't have direct agency to connect with God. And so what we need is this manifestation on earth, which is Jesus Christ, right? The Son. But also we need the Holy Ghost, which is a mechanism by which God can act within the world. It's because ordinary beings can't bear the ultimate truth. It's the same when it talks about the Dharmakaya, right? So these ultimate things cannot be perceived by ordinary mind. And so appearances wouldn't arise for us unless they were dependent on causes and conditions. It's the coming together of causes and conditions that makes things illusion-like appear. But also, because they're dependent on other factors, they're empty of existence. So these are the two important points that are made by Nagarjuna. And it's the same as explaining method and wisdom, appearance and emptiness, clarity, emptiness, bliss, emptiness. The synthesis of this middle way between the two extremes is all about the fact that things appear, but as they appear, that they are not real. They are not substantial. And so dependent origination is an illusion-like process. We mustn't think of it as being ultimate. We have this notion like there's these kind of laws of the universe. And because of the laws of the universe, then we can determine outcomes, right? We can extrapolate backwards to the Big Bang. We can see what's going to happen in the future because we see it as being like a fixed system. But there's a paradox here. Have you identified that? The paradox is that we've got this really substantially existent system. For example, we've got the laws of the universe and we've got apparent matter that arises as a real thing because of these laws. You have a paradox. The paradox is, okay, what happened before the Big Bang? Or where did the laws of the universe come from? And then we get into a feedback loop, right? We get into a paradox that cannot be solved. So dependent origination solves this problem because it says, and it's completely logical, that things only appear because they are dependently arising. But because they are dependently arising, they hold no substantial existence in themselves. So you don't fall into this issue, this problem of existence. There are two issues. There's two problems. There's one of non-existence and existence, right? And when we look at non-existence, it seems a little bit easier to solve that problem. We say, well, I know there's nothing called non-existence because something arises, right? I see stuff. I don't know what it is, but there isn't nothing. It doesn't answer the question, why isn't there nothing? But it does eliminate the idea that there is nothing. But on the other side, then we have a problem with the existence. If things exist, then the question is, where do they come from, or are they permanent? And if they're permanent, then there's a problem there. Because a permanent thing cannot be changing. So there can't be a universe where Choga exists and a universe where Choga doesn't exist, because that's changed. That universe has changed. It's then become dependent. It's in a codependent relationship. This is the problem. So the topic on dependent origination is extremely profound, but my advice to you is to look at Nagarjuna. First, look at the root versus the middle way, and then start looking at the commentary, Entering the Middle Way by Chandakirti, and look at the reasoning of the Prasangika Madhyamaka, the consequentialist school. It might give you a headache, but this is the best way to come to understand emptiness. And the meaning of dependent origination is emptiness. It's not that nothing exists. It's not a nihilistic position. This is the most important thing. Emptiness is not a nihilistic position. It's not saying that nothing exists. There's a big problem with non-existence. It's saying that things appear, but they're illusion-like, that they have no substantial meaning. And this is directly related to our meditation. It's not just theory. You know, if you look at something, the question I always ask people is, can you be aware of that, and can you think about it at the same time? Right? It's the same meaning as dependent origination. How are you going to find out about that? You're not going to find out about that by logically thinking about this. Well, logically, I shouldn't be able to think about it, or logically I should. Or if I thought about it, that's not the area you need to look at. You need to look at direct experience of phenomena and come to understand that. You see that? Yes. Okay. Is a thought about that or knowledge about that the same as perceiving that object? And what is knowledge about an object? What is the redness of this pen, for example? It's what we call in science, we call it qualia, right? Subjective experience. Look up this term, qualia. It's a good term. I like this term, but the way that it's discussed in science is kind of misleading. They don't really understand what they're talking about when they talk about qualia. What they're looking for is events in the brain. They're looking for physical action in the brain that produces a subjective experience. And for them, that's qualia. That's not what qualia is. Qualia is the subjective experience itself, right? Regardless of whether there's a brain, you know, we could be like a brain in a jar. We could be simulated in a computer. Christopher has studied this simulation theory a lot, so you can talk to him about it. So we could, those are all possible, right? We could be dreaming and just be dreaming this stuff, and it's not really there. Forget about that. What is it that we experience? What is the experience of redness? What is the experience of awareness? This is where we look in Buddhism. And it's strictly related again to dependent origination. I won't go on anymore. Yeah, okay. Are Yidams gods which should have a personal relationship or worship of personal relationship of worship, or simply meditation objects? Are they simply meditation objects? It's a difficult topic, and it's not unrelated to dependent origination. It's not unrelated to appearance emptiness. The point is that you appear, I appear, I'm on the screen right now, right? You're listening to me. Those things appear, but they're not real. So you say, are Yidams real things? And I say, are you a real thing? What you experience, is that real? Right? So this question is from Lobsang from the United States. And we basically take things to be real. So often people will say, well, Buddhists talk about gods. Are gods real? And the answer, for example, my teacher will give is, well, you see yourself to be real. So gods are just as real as that. But that's kind of like a joke, right? Because what the Buddhists say is that you're not real. So there's something really weird about Yidam practice, like Tara and Chenrezig and all this sort of thing. Their method, right? It says in the text that these are methods. That means they're provisional. But at the same time, Yidams do appear, just like you and me appear. Ghosts appear, etc. It doesn't mean that they're real. They're manifestations of enlightened mind. And you have mind. You have enlightened mind. But in the same way as we provisionally seem or have illusion-like appearance, Yidams also have this. And that means, and this I'm just going for, I don't understand it, but I'm just going from, I understand meditation, and I can make a correlation with that and how Yidams appear. But Yidams are also beings. For example, if you're in trouble, and you pray to Tara, and I've done this many times, I've experimented, like somebody attacks you in the street, and you go, Om Tara, Tu Tara, Tu Tara, so, strange shit happens. If you've got cancer, if you've got some chronic illness, and you make a deal with Mahakala, strange shit happens, right? So mind manifests. You have to remember that in the Buddha Dharma, especially in the higher levels of the view, we say that external stuff doesn't exist. We say it's a projection of our own karmic imprints. It's a projection of mind. So we create this world. And the power of your faith, your conviction, the power of your belief, the power of your creative aspect of your mind, let's put it that way, right? Forget about belief. The creative aspect of your mind manifests. And if you have a strong belief in that, that manifests strongly. And so, like I always say this, good tantric practitioners, like we talk about how these are methods, we use these methods to transform the mind. It's a bit like a trick or a game, right? It's like some psychological experiment. You know, a therapist will tell you, will make up stories in order for you to change the way you think about your trauma in the past so you can overcome it. Yeah, we see it like it's like a trick. But for a good Dharma practitioner, a really good Dharma practitioner, a tantric practitioner, they encounter the deities. They encounter the Yidams. They have conversations with them. The Yidam, for example, can put a bridge across the river for a good practitioner. So the answer is that they do exist. They're not just objects. But for poor practitioners like us, for beginners, then it's just like a method. Yidams. It's called Yidam. Yeah. It kind of means Yi is like mind or intellect, and Dampa is like to bind. So it means a Samaya deity. So it's you could say an intellectual binding to the sacred. It's a sacred commitment. A Yidam is. You make a commitment to this mental object. Yi is mind, right, or intellect, and then that unlocks the power of your enlightened mind and manifests in our world, and it really does. You know, you just try it. Do 1,000,000 Om Mani Padme Hum mantras and see what happens. This is what you need to do. I did it when I was a beginner. I thought, okay, they say this is like mantra works, but really, does it work? And so I did like 1,000,000 mantras. And I thought, shit, it does work. All kinds of strange things start to happen. But what we believe is that the power of mind is limitless, and that everything we perceive is a projection. So it's quite kind of logical to understand if you take control of your mind, then you can manifest things. I mean, it's really kind of like popular these days, this idea of manifestation. Well, it comes from something real. The way it's been kind of used in modern days is a bit like, I want to win the lottery. I can imagine myself winning the lottery. It's like that. It's just based on greed and stuff, right? So that's not going to work in the end. But it's a real thing, manifestation. But don't think it's just like, well, if I want something, I'll get it. And if it's based on desire, it will be the cause of your future suffering. It's not going to be the cause of your happiness. You need to understand that, right? You know, like, I want a really beautiful girlfriend. Something like that. It's not going to work. You're just going to feed your negative emotions. So Yidam is a manifestation. Yidam is a manifestation of your own enlightened mind. It means to bind the mind. And what do you bind the mind to? You bind the mind to a sacred commitment, and especially to what's called the Vajrayana view. That's a view of purity. But it's not easy to have the Vajrayana view. It's more difficult than understanding dependent origination. Understanding the view of perfect purity is the most difficult, highest level of view. But don't be disheartened. You can get there. You just have to, you have to study, you have to contemplate, and you need to condition yourself, which is what we call meditation. So they're not just simply meditation objects, and also they're not gods in the terms of what we think of as gods, like worldly gods. Like people say, Buddhism is atheistic, so why do they have so many gods like in the Hindu tradition? Well, we don't. Buddha wasn't a god, and the Yidams aren't gods. Buddha represents enlightened mind. Yidams represent enlightened mind, right? God didn't create the universe. Your mistaken way of thinking created the universe. So we don't worship them as deities, like all-powerful deities. And at the beginning, we say Om Sabhava Shuddha Savar Dhamma Sabhava Shuddha Hong at the beginning of all Vajrayana practice. What does that mean? Everything is primordial, pure in nature. It always has been, right? What does that mean? Everything is empty. We start off by saying everything is empty. Why? So you don't cling to the deity as being something real. Because clinging to the deity of being something real downgrades your Vajrayana practice to a theistic practice. Do you understand that? So at the very beginning, we do purification at the beginning of all tantric practices. And part of that is this prayer that proclaims the empty nature of phenomena. The Vajrayana practice is predicated upon the view of emptiness, first and foremost. It goes on from there. Like they say, why don't they talk about emptiness in the Vajrayana? Why are they talking about deities being real and perfect and sublime and luminous and all this sort of stuff? What happened to emptiness? That's because they don't understand Sanskrit, right? Because the first thing you say is everything is emptiness when you start. It's important to know. What are your thoughts on Lama Dawai Gocha? I have no idea who the guy is. I just quickly looked at his website. And it sort of says, oh, he has many great teachers, Dalai Lama, Palno Rinpoche. He's been practicing for 20 years. I don't know why he calls himself a Lama. Everybody claims their Dalai Lama's their teacher, right? Thousands of people have had like day teachings from the Dalai Lama. I'm not saying anything about this guy. I don't know who he is. But it's a common mistake we make. It's like, oh yeah, I got a teaching from the Dalai Lama 20 years ago. A teacher is somebody who like teaches you. Like every day, for like 12 years. Like everybody you say, who's your teacher? They say, oh, the Karmapa was my teacher. Oh, really? When did you rely on the Karmapa? I went to the Munlam a couple of times. You know, Munlam's like a 10-day festival where everybody gets together and the Karmapa will sort of show on the screen and give a short teaching. That's not what relying on a teacher is. Right? I relied on my teacher. I went into retreat for 4 years and I met this Tibetan teacher and I thought, this guy knows meditation. He knows what he's talking about. I need his teachings. And when our 4-year retreat ended, I ran away to Nepal. And he's like, what the hell are you doing here? Get out of here. You know, right? But I just forced myself in there. And so I managed to get 12 years of teaching. That's relying on a teacher. And if you say, who's your teacher? You go, oh, Dalai Lama, you know. I was a student of Trungpa. We rattle off these big names. They say, who's your teacher? I say, Khenpo Labu. They're like, who the hell's Khenpo Labu? He's nobody. Right? We like big names. And so everybody like quotes these big names. So I look at his website and it's like, Penro Rinpoche, Dalai Lama was my teacher. Doesn't say how many years he spent in retreat. Doesn't say what text he studied. So I don't know what his basis for being Lama is. I don't want he teaches. It says everything is free. And then it's on the bottom, it's like donate here. So I don't know what that's about. But he's probably okay. I'd have to look at some of his videos. Generally, if I look at a video for 5 minutes, then I know what the view and the practice of that person is. It's quite easy. If you understand meditation, it's easy to understand where people are coming from. But there's a lot of people in the West, right? And the other thing, Penro Rinpoche is a really authentic Tibetan teacher, right? And what I really like about him, he established this wonderful kind of Shedra monastery in India. He ran away from Tibet, right, because of the Chinese. And then he's kind of a big name in Tibet, especially Eastern Tibet, in this Nakchen area. And he just thought, well, I've just got to start a monastery. I've got to do whatever I can. He had no money, nothing. And the Indian government gave him some land. And you see all these pictures of him when he was younger, like carrying bags of cement and digging holes in the ground. I really like that. And why does he do that? Because he said, I'm not learned. He said, I haven't learned anything. And I'm not realized. But at least I can use my strength of my body, my determination. And he's built up one of the best Shedras. But he's done some kind of controversial things in order to get there. For example, he's made a lot of connections with Hollywood elites and stuff like that. And he recognized some Hollywood actor as well. And I suspect he did that kind of thing in order to get money and stuff. But he was doing it for a good reason. So when people quote him as being their teacher, I kind of always wonder a little bit. But I don't know anything about this Lama Dawai Gocha. Maybe I'll, if I have time, I'll look and see what he's talking about, and I can give you my opinion later. What do you think about vegetarianism, Buddhism? Vegetarianism in Buddhism? This is from Scotland, anonymous. The last one was from Maya in the United States of America. Yeah. So this is a really big topic, right? Because most people think that Buddhists are vegetarians, and that's a mistaken assumption. And it comes from Chinese Mahayana Buddhism. So the Buddha didn't make any rules about monks being vegetarians. It's quite clear that it's negative to like kill an animal and to kill an animal to eat it. And so monks aren't allowed to do that. So for example, if a monk was living on his own or her own, a nun living on their own, then they wouldn't be able to like kill an animal to eat. So they'd be vegetarians. But the way the system was set up is that the monks and nuns had to beg for their food. And the Buddha said specifically is you can't be preferential. You just take whatever you're given. So if you're given meat, you take meat. If you're given vegetables, you can take vegetables. And some people criticize this. They think it's like, well, you're getting the lay people to do your dirty work for you. Because the lay people will kill the animal, which gives bad karma, and then they give this to the monks. And a lot of people don't like that. But it's kind of misunderstanding the whole point of the thing. A monk or a nun is somebody who's decided they're going to get personal liberation. They can do whatever they can to get out of samsara. So the Buddha said, okay, well, you need to do this, this, and this. And one thing you need to do is avoid all negativity. So you have to live it's really difficult, right? You have to live in a way where you don't have to like dig the soil and kill worms. You don't have to chop down trees. You don't have to cut grass, etc., 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 all these things. And because of that, then the only way to survive is to beg for your food, to have very few desires, be able to live under a tree, not worry about worldly comforts, right? So this is one path, and it's it's like basically if you want to get out of samsara the quickly as possible, you're not really worried about any high level of realization, take the path of an arahat. Give up all worldly concerns, and you're not allowed to store food, you're not allowed to have money, all these sort of things. It's like the quickest way. It's a crash course in awakening. And so the monks weren't supposed to be vegetarians. So where does this come from? Well, Buddhism traveled to China in the about 4th century, right? There's Kumarjiva, went to Persian, went to China a long, long time ago, and they established Buddhism there. And then it was mostly Mahayana Buddhism, right? Don't know exactly what Kumarjiva was, but as it progressed in China, then it's, almost completely Mahayana Buddhism. And there the most important thing is bodhicitta, loving kindness and compassion. And so the idea is, well, you shouldn't kill animals. Where did this come from? It came from a Chinese emperor. It wasn't even a monk, and it wasn't from the Buddha. He wrote a very famous book in China about Buddhism, and he said that Buddhists really should be vegetarians because you shouldn't have to kill animals. So if you go to Taiwan, which is like where the traditional lineage of Buddhism survives in China because it was destroyed by Mao Zedong in mainland China, then they've got a huge vegetarian kind of culture. But doesn't come from the Buddha. It's a thing, something came many centuries after the Buddha, and it came from a Chinese emperor. But the thing is, most Buddhists in the world are Chinese Buddhists, right? There's 300 million Buddhists, 350 million Buddhists come from China. That's like the majority of Buddhists, and they're Mahayana. So in the Mahayana, then Mahayanas try to be vegetarians, but even Korean monks eat meat. Like they don't in the monastery. At first I thought they were totally vegans, but the bigwigs in the monasteries get invited out all the time by lay people. And it's the same actually in Tibet, and it's the same in Malaysia and places like that. And then lay people try to give them lavish food, so they take them to fancy restaurants and they buy all kinds of stuff. And a lot of it's meat. And so when they're outside of the monastery, and it's the same in Nepal, then they will eat meat. But in the monastery, they'll keep very strict rules of not eating meat, and also they won't eat after lunchtime. But when they get taken out by sponsors, then anything goes. That's the way it was described to me by a Korean woman who used to be a nun. So she really knows what she's talking about, and she's also a friend of a lot of these bigwig Korean lamas, right? Big shots. In general, they're really good, the Korean monks. I don't know what it's like in Japan. I do know that on moon days, then the Japanese monks will eat meat and drink alcohol often. And this is to make a statement. It's like we're not clinging to this conduct of being pure. And so they will intentionally drink meat or alcohol. But I don't know if that's just the lay Zen monks and that the fully ordained monks don't. So as you know, then the Zen monks, some of them get married, so we kind of have this idea that Zen monks all get married, but they don't. It's only a certain sect, and they're not actually fully ordained monks. The fully ordained monks do keep this vow of celibacy. So anyway, that's kind of a roundabout way of explaining it. Vegetarianism isn't prescribed by the Buddha, but if a monk will have to, there's certain conditions when a monk has to find their own food. For example, if they're traveling long distances between monasteries, like there's retreat periods and there's this free period, and they're allowed to move from monastery to monastery, and so they can beg on the way when they do that. But sometimes you're in the middle of nowhere and you have no choice, and you have to build the fire and you have to make food, and so there's kind of provisions for that. In your opinion, how essential are asanas and mudras? Madras, I think mudras they mean. Mudras in the practice of meditation. So that's Dante from Mexico. Ooh, hello Mexico. So this is the way I describe this point. There's what we call the 3 gates of virtue. That's the gates of body, speech, and mind. And what we try to do is we try not to overlook the smallest virtue. So in order to do that, then we don't think, obviously the mind is the most important. Out of all of those 3, then meditation is the most important, the mind is most important, but the other ones are important too. And the important thing about these 3 gates of virtue is that a particular type of virtue has a particular type of result. For example, if you offer beautiful forms, so that's like an external, it's like this sort of body or form virtue, like you offer flowers, they're beautiful. And the consequences of that are that you be reborn with a nice complexion and beautiful and that sort of thing. So like all actions of body, speech, and mind have correlating karmic results. For example, if you say prayers and aspirations, then in future lifetimes you'll be born with this melodious voice. And you might think, well, that's kind of a silly motivation, you know? I want to be beautiful and I want to have a good voice. But the thing is, if you're really charismatic and you've got a sort of melodious voice, then people will listen to you. Your voice will have power. So we look at people, for example, Westerners don't really believe in karma in past and future lives, because when we see somebody, we say, oh, Donald Trump's so evil, but he's like a billionaire. How can that be? Karma is a lie, right? And that's because in Buddhism, we believe that karma came from previous lifetimes. And we've all done different things in previous lifetimes. We've done great things and we've done horrible things, you know. We've all probably been mass murderers at some time, right? So it's not like singling anyone out. It's not blaming the victim. It's just that we've got this huge store of karma. And people who are famous, like Elon Musk and Osho, then they accumulated this in previous lifetimes for their karma, these sorts of karma, right? So a valid spiritual practitioner does think about how they're going to be reborn. And they do so in a way that hopefully is going to be positive or beneficial to others. And so they will have resources. That resource isn't so that they can be rich, it's so that they don't have to worry about money and stuff and food, and they can just meditate. So anyway, cut a long story short, there's the gates of body, speech, and mind. Asana and mudra are associated with the body, and then there's another aspect. Asana is associated with the channels, right? Winds and drops. So for example, we have this posture we all sit in, right? Well, we don't all sit in it, but we try to. You sit up straight in lotus position, right? With the shoulders back. And the point of that is to open up the channels in the body, because physical blockages do affect our practice. But this is kind of lower level of practice in general. It's the same. If you look at Ashtanga, right? Ashtanga is the 8 limbs of Hindu practice, and it starts off with yama, niyama, asana, right? So asana is the body postures. We got pranayama, it's the breath work. So it's the same, there's this progression. But the point is once you've got like the higher level of meditation, the other bits don't matter really. But still, you know, you'll see, like, the Tibetans are like this when they do the mudras and stuff like that, and when they say the prayer. Often it's kind of really sloppy. They don't pay a lot of attention. But you'll see Westerners, they'll go, oh. You know, they think it's like the most important thing in the world. You know, make your posture look beautiful, and that sort of thing. When they do prostrations, for example, you'll see they'll go very slowly. And it is important. It's important to have that mindset. But in general, then, you know, the Tibetans, they think, well, it's the lesser form of virtue. It actually says in the text, don't think like that. But they have this really strong habit to think, well, mind's most important. Especially in the Chittamatra and upwards. We say, external world is just an illusion. Everything depends on mind. But I think my advice is that you apply yourself as best you can to all of these gates. Say the mantras very clearly with a beautiful voice. Do your best to do, you know, we did this in a recent teaching. There's all these different offering mudras, and everybody does them differently. It's a real headache. But whichever one you choose to do, right, you choose to do it very, very nicely, as best as you can. That mindset is what we call the Vijñāna mindset, the mindset that does everything to the best of your ability. So they're a support. Let's put it that way. How are they, what is their importance? Are they essential to meditation practice? It's a support. Once you understand meditation, then you can discard all these things if you really do. But it's very difficult to meditate properly. If you look at all this sort of yoga postures, it's all really upright and everybody's really diligent. Look at the Zen monks, you know, when they do these sort of 1 week without sleeping, you know, it all seems to be about posture. And then look at the pictures of Tilopa and Naropa, you know, they're like, all the yogis, they're just slumped back. You'll see their bellies sticking out, and they're kind of like loose-legged and just slumped back on a couch, having a relax. And it's intentional. It's because once you've realized the Mahamudra, then you can discard everything else. You know, doesn't matter whether you do it or not. Anyway, anytime I intend to meditate, as soon as I sit down, I feel an immense spinning sensation in my head. I've looked it up, and it's supposedly due to extreme relaxation. But that can't be it after like 3 seconds. What could this mean? So I just lean into the feeling. There's lots of different reasons, right? You could have blood pressure issues. There could be medical reasons. Also, you can try different types of posture. You don't have to just like sit in one particular posture. You can, if you sit, like we've got some very extreme postures, you know, we sit, the spine just jams straight. You might find that when you do that, you trap a nerve in your spine. So you can try sitting in a chair. You can try meditating lying down, as long as you don't fall asleep, for example. And then many of the Tibetans will say, this is from somebody called Zortel from the United States. Many people will say, for example, you should just push through it, but be careful, right? Especially if you're going to faint, bang your head or something like that. And it's in terms of whether it's relaxation or I don't know. Do you feel relaxed? Sometimes people get this as a reaction. For example, people who have ADHD, or if you've got poor executive function, then as soon as you do something you've got an aversion to, it'll make you feel like your head's spinning. Like some people, they have got dyslexia. As soon as they try to read, all the letters will go like this. And it's got something to do with your executive function and the way your mind works. It's like this strong aversion to what you're doing. So if the posture itself is causing aversion, then look into that, try different postures. If the act of meditating is causing aversion, then try, for example, using mindfulness instead, applying yourself to mindfulness. Like thinking, oh, I'm not meditating, I'm just doing ordinary stuff, but I'm going to practice mindfulness, or I'll do walking meditation, right? Try different types or different iterations of practice. Remember, there's not one method that works for everybody, right? There's no one size fits all. In your November live stream, you mentioned, oh, that must have been last year. In your November live stream, you mentioned that you were making a retreat in Canada. I'm in Newfoundland. I would like you to consider it. A cabin here can be very cheap. We have beautiful nature. It might be too early to discuss this, but I'd appreciate your information on this. So this is from somebody in Newfoundland. And you know what? I actually looked, when I was first looking for land, I looked at Cape Breton this sort of area, Newfoundland, and I was very interested because there's a lot of really cheap land out there. They've got some problems with storms and things like that, which is one issue, the weather. I think it'd be great, but the reason why I decided to do something near here is because I've got this responsibility to look after my parents. Like I looked at the Yukon as well, right? You can get huge tracts of land, as Paul would say, probably. Huge tracts of land, you know, in the middle of nowhere for $100,000 or $50,000. Yeah, but it's like -50 in winter, and winter is 6 months long, and the mosquitoes are this big, and they eat you alive, you know, and it's too far away, right? If I've got to go to Yukon or Newfoundland to develop this retreat center, it's never going to happen because I'm here looking after, well, now my mother's passed away, but I'm looking after my father. So I need somewhere convenient nearby. It's a big problem because land is so expensive in British Columbia. It's even more expensive than a lot of places in Europe. It's like Vancouver is more expensive than Munich. I was just so shocked. It's just crazy. But I did find some land that was actually pretty damn cheap. It was half the price of anything else that size, and it's nearby. I can get there, right? I can get there in 3 hours, and then I can spend a couple of days, and I can work, and I can come back. So it's really important. So that's why I didn't decide on Newfoundland or Cape Breton or Northwestern Territories in the end. Okay. Do you have insights on Neo-Advaita teachers? Andrew from the United States. Can one become a teacher or follow such a teacher who calls himself a guru and sort of relays, puts in their own words, message of teachers? In general, like I don't want to blanket criticize or judge all teachers, right? I don't know them all, but in general, serious Advaita Vedanta people don't take Neo-Advaita people serious at all. And I've talked to a few. In general, they see it as being a kind of scourge of the Advaita Vedanta. It's been the worst thing ever that's happened to them because it's become very unserious. It's been kind of really wayward. And the kind of thing you hear from Neo-Advaita teachers, I mean, just some examples I can think about, is like, you know, I've heard stories of students and they go into like a bar and their Neo-Advaita teacher is there trying to pick up chicks, like they're womanizing and they're completely off their heads on drugs. And then they're like, what's going on? And they say, well, I've gone beyond duality. And that's kind of the caliber in general of most of these teachers. I'm sure there's some good ones. Like, would you classify Francis Lucille as a Neo-Advaita teacher? Maybe. But to me, he's quite a purist, really. He seems to know what he's talking about. So I don't know a lot about them, but all of the ones I've encountered, to me, are kind of doing it for fame and fortune, and don't really know what they're talking about. They're just mishmashing stuff. You have to be really careful about stuff being mishmashed and mixed up. The best thing to do, let's not blanket judge an entire category of teachers. My advice, my better advice that I'll give you is, what you should do is, if you're interested in a particular stream or lineage, then you should study that a bit. You should understand, oh, okay, what's this about? What does the traditionalists say? Where did this come from? And then compare that to what people are saying. So there's a process. It's the same in Tibetan Buddhism, right? We all think, wow, Dzogchen, great, Tibetan Buddhism sounds really interesting, pretty cool. And then we get involved in something and we don't really know, you know, what's authentic or not, or what's made up, or what is like, you know, who might be a charlatan. So the thing to do first is do a bit of research. I always say this to people. Don't just look in the phone book and go to the nearest Tibetan Buddhist center. Like I said this to somebody recently. I said, you should find, I looked in their area and I said, you should look for a local Zen center. They're like, well, why are you saying a Zen center and not a Tibetan center? And because in general, in small towns and things in the United States, then in general, the Tibetan centers are really crap. They're really bad. And it's kind of safer. You know, to, like, for example, I often tell people to go to the Thai forest, Ajahn Chah's tradition, because I've been there and I know what they're like, and they're kind of like, it's safe. But there's a lot of wayward, random stuff going on in Tibetan Buddhism, so, you know, it's not the best first step. So anyway, yeah, anyway, the advice is, first, do some research, and then check them out. Spend a lot of time checking them out. Don't just think, okay, Tibetan Buddhism is the one for me. What should I meditate? Like, go straight to practice. It's the same thing with Tummo, right? So, okay, what's the most difficult practice? I'll do that. Don't start like that. Next question: how can we cultivate genuine compassion and understanding for those with beliefs that deeply conflict with our own, while staying true to our own spiritual path? That's from Osama bin Laden, maybe, I don't know, from France. Yeah, so you can't fake it, right? But the example that's always given in the Buddha Dharma, in the Vijñāna Buddha Dharma, in this 7 points of mind training, developing loving compassion for your enemies, for example, taking these appearances on the path, is that if you have a mother who has a child who's got a fever, and that child says, "Mommy, I hate you, you're evil." It's like recently, my mom just died, right? And she had dementia, and she was often like saying that I was horrible and stuff like that when I was getting up like in the middle of the night, to clean her and stuff. And you don't think like they mean it, right? You don't think they're horrible for that. You feel sorry for them. And that's the kind of way that you need to approach it. But my suggestion is you follow the pattern that's given, the program that's given in the 7 points of mind training as taught by Lord Aticha. This is the text that teaches us how to go from our natural love and compassion for those who are near and dear to us, like our children, our mothers and things like that, and then for that to spread for all sentient beings. And it does so in a very systematic and progressive way. What a big mistake that a lot of Westerners do is that they, okay, I'm a Buddhist, I have to love my enemy, and then they go to their enemy and say, oh, I love you, I care for you, and inside their mind they're just like, oh, I hate this person, right? It's just like fake. It's the worst thing to do. That's the highest level of practice. It's the same thing. It's like Tummo. Don't think about Tummo. First, you should be able to sit for 5 minutes and meditate. Don't think about having love for all beings, including like your worst enemy, some crazed conspiracy theory QAnon person who's like making the world a horrible place. Don't start there. Start with the easy ones, and then go to people that you're kind of indifferent to, and then go to people. That's the way we do it in Buddha Dharma. But ultimately, you have to understand that people suffer because of their delusion, just like a child who's got a fever. It's like children do crazy things that harm themselves just out of spite, right? Because they're being childish. And you don't think, oh, they're evil. You think, poor child. The poor child is causing their own suffering. And that's really the way we need to think about it, But the problem is we see like billionaires and we think that's something that we want to be. We want to be rich and famous and stuff like that. We think it's important. Or we think they're special just because they're billionaires. But they're just ordinary, immature, sentient beings trapped in samsara like us. And usually they're worse than we are because their kleshas are stronger. So on that note, then what we need to do is we need to reaffirm our Vijñāna commitment, and that means that we dedicate any positivity that may have arisen from this conversation we've had for the benefit of all sentient beings, and give up our attachment for the results of our own practice, and work merely for the liberation of all beings suffering in the 6 realms of samsara. And so, until next month, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you later.